Okay, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining the first of our webinars. We've got 3 more after this, which we'll be just touching on as we go through the presentation. I want to start the presentation by really working through where I started from and what we're trying to achieve at Beattie Passive. I think it's very important that you understand the story, because it will, I think, give you an insight into the real goals of Beattie Passive. We're a bit unusual as a company in that we want to share our technology. We want people to understand the benefits of living in passive homes and living in houses that really do give you a real positive outlook into life itself. I want to start here really, if I can get the screen to move, which isn't moving. Bit of IT problems, there we are. I want to start with the first bit where I actually developed the system. I was very interested in zero carbon homes in the agenda when it came out very early on with the British government. And I set off to deliver the first of the zero carbon homes from a code 6 format. So when that first came out in 2002, I went down to London and sort of knocked at the door of the GLA and said, "What's all this about?" And they said, "Well, we've got this code of sustainable homes, and the code will set out from 1 to 6. And I said, "Great, what is code 6? And they said, "Well, no one's done it yet, but there's a big list of all the do's and don'ts." And I thought, let's have a go. I was a small developer. I've been very interested in as I say, how buildings performed. And so I set off to create this new development in Norwich. I spent the best part of 2 years in planning. And I had actually decided to go off to one of the wind farm people up in Norfolk and decided to say, how do we get the green energy from your new wind farm that's going up to this development? And I've done a deal with them, which is Ecotricity, to get the REGO certificates that was actually produced every time that a turbine goes around and produces a kilowatt of energy. And I had the receipts for that energy, and I went off to the BRE, and I went off to, again, to the Treasury and said, can I use these as proof of being green? And they said for a while, yes, that was acceptable. And I'd spent the rest of the time whilst development looking at waste compaction, solar thermal, PVs. I insulated every room. I had the first startings of MVHR that I knew of. What happened was one day I was walking around the scaffolding and got to a parapet end and looked down the wall inside the cavity. And there was not one piece of insulation in that wall. And I was building the best properties in the UK as far as they're supposed to be in this code 6, and they didn't work. It made me realise straight away, it didn't matter what I did, how long I spent with the guys, and these guys have been with me for, you know, good 6 or 7 years, that it takes one person to actually make it all collapse. And I decided at that point that I'd try to figure out a better way to build. Anyway, the crash came along in 2006-07, and the bank was saying to me, well done, Ron, you've sold 5 of these lovely properties, but can you sell the next sort of 20 by next Wednesday? Of course we couldn't, and they closed me down. And I was left with some difficult choices, as you are, with kids at private schools, big mortgages and all things like that. And I decided to start again. I thought to myself, let's use your 40 odd years of experience, because I started life as a apprenticeship at 16. And prior to that, I left school at 13 without being able to read and write. I wanted to be a golf pro. I wanted to, you know, not take academia very well. And I actually got myself a job cleaning toilets at Horsefleece Road Magistrates Court in London. And I sat and watched court cases for most of the day. And I saw all these young people coming in who had really just turned left instead of turning right. And I lived in Peckham at the time, South London, very rough area, and I could have been one of them. And so an opportunity came along for me to get an apprenticeship as a carpenter. And wow, did it change my life. All of a sudden, what I couldn't do with this, I could do with these. And I started my own company when I came out of my apprenticeship at 19 and really never looked back as far as working for myself and understanding buildings. I learned every trade. So I learned carpentry, of course. I learned plumbing and bricklaying and decorating and plastering. And then went on to be a small property developer, developing my own sites and designing them and testing them and then selling them on. So it was a long journey of actually having to understand every part of building. When I was delivering this development, I really got interested in Passivhaus. It was just coming into our agenda. And so it was in the back of my mind that there was a better way to build. But at that point, I hadn't actually investigated it in much depth. So within our build process, I didn't want to just lift one element into Passivhaus. I wanted to look and go back again to look at every single part of we build in a build process. So going back from design right through the end to the occupancy and how people live in those homes, and try to make it a more streamlined and a process that sticks together. Unlike any other home, in a Beattie Passive home, we have a continuous void around a building. So when we build, say, traditionally or traditional timber frame or whatever, we actually have different components that are all built normally by different people, and they're all insulated with different materials. They could be different material in the floor, different materials in the wall, and different materials in the roof. And as we insulate them all differently, so we get gaps. And we get gaps because we're trying to push stuff into little areas. We got gaps because we make mistakes. And it only takes a 3mm gap to reduce your U value by 159%. Now, if you can imagine how many holes and gaps there are around a building, it's absolutely massive. So we think we draw something on a drawing to be absolutely perfect on a pencil or on our keyboard. But then, in fact, what we end up with is people on site just pushing it together. And so we get all these gaps. And that means we get leaks, and that means we get thermal bypass, and that means we cost a lot of money to heat. So when I was designing the system, I thought to myself, well, why don't we have one trade, one insulation put in by one company, and that can go continually around the whole void. And that seemed to me quite sensible and simple. But, it hadn't been done before, which is very interesting. So I set off myself to see whether or not this could be done. But at the same time, I wanted to then look at every single part of the build process. Passivhaus, as I say, was coming really into my view. And, I don't know how many people here I'm talking to that converted in Passivhaus. And if you want to put your little flag up and tell me, that would be great. So I know how much detail I need to go in. But Passivhaus was invented some 30 years ago by Wolfgang Feast, a building physics doctorate who basically wanted to find a way of insulating his own home, which meant he didn't need heating. And there's 5 basic principles. You can do it anyway. It doesn't have to be timber frame. It doesn't have to be Beattie Passive. You can do it using straw. You can do it using brickwork. It's just that these techniques haven't been designed to deliver it. And what I wanted to do was deliver a system that will give you it by default. It doesn't matter what shape of building, how you're building. If you're building Beattie Passive, you will achieve that goal of being able to achieve the Beattie Passive standard and the passive standard. So the five main processes are complete insulation. So an insulation that goes from the floor around the walls and across the roof or ceiling. And of course, in Beattie Passive, with its void, it does that every time, no problem at all. We've then got really good triple glazed windows, because it's great having a good wall, but if you haven't got good windows, then that's also going to be an issue for you. So triple glazed windows, argon filled, 0.78 U value and below. So very good windows. Heat recovery ventilation, a very, very important part. Now, just let me go into that a little bit more, is that in our own homes at the moment, if we go and we put our central heating on, we've probably got a trickle vent above our windows. We've probably got gaps and gaps all over our houses. We also go into our bathrooms and our kitchens and we put our fans on and extractors. And what happens then is we just exhaust all the energy that we've already created in those rooms. So with heat recovery ventilation, you're going to actually recover plus 80% of the energy that you've already created. That means that, of course, when we're actually using our toilets and our kitchens, that energy isn't going straight outside. It's extracting from those areas, but we're recovering the energy and putting it back across the cooler air that is coming in from the outside. So a very simple machine, but massive reduction in the amount of energy that we need. We then look at air tightness. Air tightness in a passive house is below 0.6, where in the building regs it's 5, or in some places it's 10. That means that the air is going to keep going out the building constantly. And all we're doing is we're using our central heating to heat the air that is going out, to heat the air again that is going out, and we've got no reuse of that at all. And unless we're going to get a building below 0.6, then we're not going to get to that passive house reuse of that energy all the time. And in fact, MVHR won't work unless anything above 3, where it's really not useful at all. So our air tightness in a Beattie Passive home really needs to be 0.6, and always is. It's not because we've done anything clever. It's just because we've got one material, one tape, and you can get to 99% of all of that when the tests are done. So you can actually repair anything that's been torn by mistake or hasn't been done properly at the right time. And we've not failed yet on any homes that we've done across the UK that hasn't achieved that 0.6, and our partners are as well. So it's a very simple system. No mastics, no nothing like that, just one tape and one air tightness barrier. Thermal bridges is another really important one. And when we've got in Beattie Passive that continuous void around that always delivers a Y value, which is the thermal coupling between the two, outside and inside, and it's thermal bridge free. So we get to that passive house standard really easy. So building the new stock of passive houses that need to be built to save on energy is going to become very simple if using the Beattie Passive system for all of you. The benefits of that are basically the energy performance, of course. So you're reducing the energy performance of that building right down. So we're really cutting that amount of energy you need. But the biggest thing that's going to come forward is the enhanced comfort levels and the health benefits in living in passive houses. You don't dust anymore. The air is being transferred and it's being filtered through the system in the MVHR. So you're not getting the build-up of dust. You don't get pollen. Have you got a cold, or in fact, if you said these viruses are around, but you was extracting that air all the time, then it will reduce the amount of infections and things we are. And certainly across the world now, a lot of hospitals and kindergartens and that sort of thing are being built to passive house because of the benefits. So we're going to see a big change in time. We're going to see it going from the benefits of energy to the benefits of health, which is massive. And then, of course, we've got the zero carbon agenda. And for all of us now, I think climate change has been brought to the forefront. I think this virus that we're going through at the moment will make us think that we've got to come out of this and we've got to invest and do things into the built environment and make sure that we're not going to have the issues we've had this last summer and this winter with flooding and fires and all the other things that are going on. So the benefits of Passive House, I think, are absolutely massive. But Beattie Passive has got many other agendas. And I'm going to go through now some of them, but there is more. These are the key ones that I wanted to address. And I think one of the biggest problems we're going to have is the skill shortage in the building sector. We lose 400,000 people a year going out of the build sector, and we're not bringing anything like that in. And we're going to see a massive shortage of skilled workers going forward. So we've got to have new systems coming forward that are going to be semi-skilled. They're going to allow the young people of today to get back into building. I mean, I was lucky. I went from, cleaning toilets, if you like, onto sites and working. Fantastic. And I know that we've got a whole generation of youngsters that job would be perfect for. So we've got to have a system that allows us to deliver it in all different ways. And we can do that with the Beattie Passive system. What we done was we decided to do it as a stick build, and that was the way that we started it. We then went on to a panel build, and now we're going on to off-site manufacture. So once you've done one of those systems, you understand the complete build system. There's only 13 components and they go together the same way. The building system itself can be built in any shape or size. So there's not a house yet come to me that we haven't been able to design and build. And because it's so simple with those 13 components all going to go the same way, it's really simple to people to get the grips of it. And we've got our own training academy where people can come and learn to build the Beattie Passive system. The biggest part, and this is the absolutely biggest part of anything we ever do, is we need to guarantee performance. We need to test every building because we've got to guarantee that what we're doing has been done. When I walked around that site in Norwich and I looked down that cavity and I moaned at my foreman, I moaned at the bricklayer who didn't put it in, they all had good excuses. And I'd have never known that if I hadn't just by chance walked around, and maybe Beattie Passive would never have been built. But by testing every building, by understanding that every building will be built incorrectly, because that's what happens. And if we test at the right time, when we've got the opportunity to put it right without any major cost, that's the key. So every building in Beattie Passive is, first of all, signed off by a structural engineer. Then it's thermal imaged, then it's air tested, then it's sound tested if that's necessary. Every single building that will ever be built. And when it's reached that criteria and all the checklists come back in from the site and the people that have built it, that gets a certification. And until it gets a certification, it won't be signed off. So what we're doing here, we're putting checks and balances in to deliver the home that we should be buying. Because at the moment, we don't know what we're buying. We spend the biggest part of our income on our homes and we don't know what we're going to get. We actually buy an insurance because we think it's going to go wrong. So, you know, we've got to get buildings to deliver the as built, as designed. Also then, I was really concerned about flooding. I decided that if we put a membrane around the whole building, that can do two jobs. It can stop radon gases from getting into the building. And I don't think any of us realise how damaging radon gas can be. And we always say, well, we haven't got no radon on here. Radon's over everywhere. Every part of the planet has got radon. It just depends on what the concentration is. It's the biggest killer of lung cancer apart from smoking. So if you're going to die of lung cancer, and many people do, there's about 2,500 people a year in the UK die of lung cancer. There's more people of radon lung cancer. There's more people in America who die of radon gas than they do in car crashes. So I don't think we really understand the issues with that. So every single Beattie Passive home is protected for radon gas, full stop. And that also can be used as a flood barrier because it's encapsulating the whole building. And our buildings are designed to fail as well. I mean, what is the point of having a building that when it gets soaking wet, all the insulation sags and it starts to rot? So I designed Beattie Passive that every bit of moisture that got into that building would find its way to a ventilated floor. And at the bottom of that ventilated floor, then that will dissipate out. So I expect Beattie Passive buildings to be filled with water at some point in their life because that's what happens to buildings. Also in fire. Why don't we build timber frames that burn down? So I decided that when we build our side of the wall, we're going to not have an hour fire. All our walls are going to be 2-hour fire. So every wall of the house is 2 hour. And then when you have a party wall, you have a gap. And then you have another 2-hour wall. So we're getting near 4 hours of fire protection from a fire starting in one house to going through to the next house. Then that included sound. I always remember I built some terraced houses and I was in one of them one day and I heard someone going upstairs with a radio on and I could hear near enough everything. And these were built to so-called, you know, robust standards. So I decided that that was never going to be good enough. So our sound is between 52 and 57 dB. That's up to 6 times better than building regulations. So a massive improvement. And again, if we test every single house, and we know that every single house has been built correctly because we've done a sound test in every one. It's a wonderful understanding. It really is. Inspection, I talked about that in this testing, is a very important part of it. And so a Beattie Passive independent engineer or surveyor will come around to every build and they will look at that building. And because the building structure is open when it's structurally complete. He can put his head in the walls, in the floor, in the roof, in the ceiling, and see every single structural joint. At the moment, when an inspector turns up on site, you can't see much because he's looking at your day's work. But in a Beattie Passive home, it's completely open. And he can say then, yes, that's built correctly. Wow, you know, what we're doing is reducing risk. Reduce risk, we cut cost. And isn't it lovely to know that you can always do that at every single Beattie Passive home? All the materials are A-rated. They're all in the BAB Green Guide. They're all chosen because they're going to work with the other materials around them. So as I said before, they're all chosen because they don't suffer when moisture gets into them. Our insulation is designed that moisture will only fall through it. It won't go across. So you can tip water and water and water and water in it and nothing will happen. It will find its way to the void and dissipate. There's no wastage. We do everything in BIM, so we 3D model the building, and then we can tell you exactly how much materials go into that building. And that is, again, massive cut down of waste and cost as well, which is very important. And one of the other sort of things is about lifetime homes and flexibility. I've never liked buildings to be static. I believe that every building should change and alter over its lifetime. And as the residents and the people that own them want to do so. Most of us live in homes that have changed over the years, but it's been very difficult to do so. We're knocking down walls, we're putting in lintels, we can't move walls, we put new foundations in. So every Beattie Passive home is designed with a minimum amount of internal walls. And there's a service void that goes continually around that building. So every single bit of that building can be opened up and you can get to the services and move them around. So a very simple process, a very simple build system. Our U values start at 0.11 and for our walls and our roof and our floor 0.09 and then go down. As I said, our air tightness is 0.6, our Y values are 0.039 and below. Our sound is up to 57 dB and our fire to 2 hours. And this is standard. We do nothing that is any worse than that ever. What we do is we get better. And I've just finished a house at wall U value of 0.075, which is incredibly insulated. When I first designed the system, I was lucky enough to be able to patent it. And that's really important because we can control the quality of Beattie Passive. And I don't know there's many other building systems around the world that can happen. And certainly we are the only company in the UK that's certified by the Institute in Germany. And that gives us, as I say, a real stamp of quality from the Institute. But also we're now patented in 42 countries with 97 patents. And Beattie Passive is growing because of that. So that's really exciting. When we talk about what sort of property it can be built in, it can be built in any shape and size. These are just some of them. All properties start with the same components and put together. So they're the same construction type. All that happens is they're put together in slightly different shapes or clad differently for roofs and facades. Some interesting ones here. The one top left was built on the top of the Isle of Man. So we can be built anywhere as far as the wind's concerned and the wind structure across the whole of the UK. Also, the one on the bottom row from the left was a lovely big farmhouse we built some 6 years ago, six years ago, yeah, in Cambridge. And that one got hit with lightning just as we handed it over to the client. He took possession of it. He was laying his lovely green carpets, and then I got a phone call saying, oh, Ron, my house is on fire. I could hear him sort of shouting down the phone. It was about 4 o'clock in the morning. I didn't wake up and answer my mobile till just gone 6. I jumped in the car and got down there. It must have been sort of 8 o'clock. And there was 4 fire engines outside. There was hoses everywhere, but there wasn't anyone to be seen. And the house looked exactly the same as I'd left it 2 or 3 weeks ago. Got into the in the lounge, and everyone's sitting around having a cup of tea. And you know, Martin was in a bit of disarray and said to me that they had a massive strike at about 3:30 in the morning. Nearly threw him out of bed. He got up, he ran out the house. You could see steam coming up from the outside of the roof. And that's because the insulation made of 98% steam. So it's a steam bubble, basically. And he called the fire brigade. They came along, they saw the steam coming up. They thought it was smoke. They went in, they smashed holes in the wall, they put a fire engine and water in. And then someone said, there's no flames. So they were all sitting there, and I was terrified. It was one of the early ones that we'd done. And then the chief fire officer came up to me. He said, Ron, I don't know how this house has survived. He said that we lost 9 other buildings from the Wash down to Kent. And this timber frame building should not have been here. So we went off to Warrington, and the Cambridge Fire Brigade done some more investigation. And it was because it was so insulated. It was because it had fireboards both sides. It was because the insulation just got blown out by the explosion of 180,000 watts going through it, that basically there was no oxygen in it. It went out and there wasn't a fire. So not something I wanted to have a test like that done, but you know, a bit extreme, but it did work. So what products have Beattie Passive got? And some of the seminars that we'll be doing from now on will go into these in more detail, but basically we've got our on-site delivery. And that where we actually can produce Beattie Passive and then go and erect it throughout the country. We've got our flying factories and flying factory partners, and this is really exciting because what we're doing is we're sharing the Beattie Passive system with many partners across the UK, so they can actually build in it, they can get the benefits, they can get the cost reductions, they can make the profits. And where we are, we're the design and we're the test company. So we're the intel inside those buildings. And we will learn and we will gain and we will pass that family of goodness around, and that's what we hope to do. We are now moving into volumetric, and I'm very pleased to announce that very soon we'll be opening our first full volumetric factory. And then again, our partners and partnerships around the UK will grow with that. And that's looking at a next generation of zero carbon homes, built with young people and working with ex-prisoners and regenerating areas where factories need to be. So that's an exciting thing. We've also got our House 4 range, and that's looking at homelessness and that type of sort of product that is being very popular at the moment, and that's going out. And then we've got our retrofit. I mean, we've got these seminars, so I won't be saying much, but you know, retrofit is such a massive opportunity. We need to be retrofitting a property every 2 seconds, really, I think, to catch up with our 2050 populations, and we've not even started. So that one needs to move on, and I say in the seminars later on we'll be going into a lot more depth on those, so please join if you're interested in retrofit. And then we've got our T-Cozy Plus, and that's basically taking flats that are poor in insulation, cold and damp, and putting a new building over the top, and then using the roof space to build more. Sorry, very popular in London and sort of cities where the price of those apartments is very high. Excuse me while I get some refreshment, talking too much. So, what are the delivery processes? We've got on-site stick build, creating a stick, which is really simple, out of 2 bits of 3x2 or 4x2, a bit of ply gusset, creates a void that then goes continually around the building. It's not rocket science. There is nothing clever in Beattie Passive. There is nothing, Christ, I'm not clever, believe me. There is nothing that is difficult or exotic. It's just simple building. We can do that in panel. We can do it in small panel or big panel, which we craned in with the doors and windows and power in it. We can do it as an off-site volumetric, where you just take a whole frame and then you finish it on site. Or we will be doing it soon as completely finished homes, put up in a day. And I think we've got a big market for that coming forward, and we want to work with housing associations and partners in that. So we become a full-time partner with them, and they can then, their opportunities to build their housing stock with their people, for their people in the locations where they are. So they're not going to be buying it from North Yorkshire to put it into Surrey. They're going to have their own factories in Surrey, delivering it with local workforce, which is really important. So when I talk about it's the same box, and I feel that there's a bit of understanding here, because all houses are basically the same frame, the same brickwork or timber frame. But if we take the external of that building and we say, if we're going to make it look modern, or we're going to look at traditional, we're going to put a block of flats. Beattie Passive, it's the same box. So we've got the same box and the contemporary one, but they're slightly offset. Then we're going to clad it in render, and we're going to put a roof that is got a slope going down one side. And then we've got a traditional one where we've got a traditional clay tile with render and a brick skirt. Same building, same size, same everything, but look at the difference in how they look. And then we're going to put one on top of each other. And that's going to be completely sealed for insulation, completely sealed for fire, and even completely sealed when Mrs. Jones has a bath and the phone rings and the bath floods and that all goes down 4 floors and floods everybody else. Why do we do that? Why don't we have a completely flood barrier? So when that does happen, there's a couple of overflows and it goes out. The insurance company would save a fortune. And so, but we don't do it. So every Beattie Passive home thinks about what if. That's the key to it, because there always is an if. Right, our house for ones, as I say, we've got a seminar coming up on the 29th, it says there. Again, for the homeless, but built exactly the same way. And we'll be going into more of that at that time. Our flying factories, again, on the 15th, which is the next one. And that's going into partnerships. That's going into how we work together. How can we bring your organisation to really understand the benefits of Beattie Passive and the costs and are real associated around that. So that's an exciting one for you. These are some of our partners already. We've got, these are spread out across the country. We've got a few more coming up all the time. So this list is growing very much so. And then we've got our retrofit. As I said before, massive opportunity across the UK. We're going to see, I know Wales at the moment, the Welsh government are really pushing it hard. We're going to see climate change. We've got such a massive housing stock in poor condition. The one on the right there is a block of flats we're working on, or was working on, before the shutdown at Great Yarmouth, where we're going to be reducing the energy by 80%. And some massive changes in the way people live in there as well. So look out for that one if you've got time. And then we've got our training academy. And it's really important to understand everyone can build Beattie Passive. We've got people that have never built a house at home before building their own homes, knowing that they're going to build it correctly, knowing that it's going to reach that standard. And having fun doing it as well. So that's worth, if you're thinking of building your own home or being part of it, our training courses are run throughout the year, and they're really worth having a week or 2 weeks training. It's an insight into a very, very simple but effective build system. Young people, as I say, we've got a whole amount of trouble coming without getting more young people back in the industry. So Beattie Passive can work with colleges, it works with prisoners. We're working at prisoners at the moment in Wales and in Thetford. And we need to stop spending the £15 billion a year recycling prisoners and the pain and trouble that we go to. And we need to give them careers. Every prison in the UK can actually spend time building homes now instead of silly little jobs that they're doing. I mean, it's crazy. So we've got a big program in front of us to do that. So the system, I'm coming near enough to the end of it now, so I hope I'm not boring you too much, but we take your drawings, we then put it into a Revit, and once we're into that design model, we can then blow it apart in any which way that suits the job or the client. So stick built, panel built, volumetric or modular. And then we get a cutting list with all of the drawings and done. And that 3D model is really important because that 3D model is with you forever. That 3D model goes to your site. That 3D model can be on your iPhone or your iPad. So before you go out, you can actually look at every single detail you're going to build and then build it that way. You can stand back at the end of the day and say, crikey, I built that bit. It looks like that. Everything's been pre-made and pre-done with a simple numbering system. And so it's a Lego. It's really, you know, we talk about the IKEA furniture. It's probably easier, to be honest with you. You know, we don't mind if you've got a few screws left over. What we do in as far as putting the building together is concerned, we put it together with a big tech screw. And the reason we use a tech screw, it's got a big hexagon head on the end of it. And there's nothing worse than putting something in the wrong position and realizing it and trying to get it out, and you take the top of the screw off. Where if you can use the hexagon end, pull it out, adjust and put it back again. They're phenomenal screw. They take about 3 tons of shear on them, and the whole building is joined together with them. But they're also totally reusable buildings. So I believe that every building should have that end of life, use. So our buildings are built for hundreds of years, and they will be around for hundreds of years. But if someone wants to take one down and reuse it, we can do. One of the things on one of our early retrofits was we built our first test building. We got all our sort of painting information and building regulations and things. And then we took that building down and we made a large extension out of it. It went for one of our first retrofits and put it all back again, even the screws and insulation, everything. So all our buildings are totally reusable. So every building has got the same process, but it's designed that it's flexible and easily moved around. Right, I'm pleased we've reached the end of that. I'm hoping I haven't bored you. So if there is any questions, Isabel's going to be beside me here, and I'll try to make it a sort of 10 minutes or so of questions if there are any from anyone here today.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that, Ron. So the first question is from Peter Collins, who is living in one of our properties at Graven Hill. He said, why are none of the big builders building Passivhaus, and where do you see the industry going in the next few years? Okay,
right, it's change. It's basically change and cost. I spent a lot of time with Barrett's, with say a few of the other ones, Redrow. Recently, we've had all the drawings come over from Bovis and Guildford Troy to say, can you price up their jobs? So things are changing. And I think the biggest thing about this is that the customer, you're changing. You know, you're saying to yourself, why am I spending money on the gas and electricity and heating when I can live in a passive home? So we're seeing a massive change in the industry. And also, of course, we've got climate change. So we are seeing this, this change from the builders that really will matter. But also we're seeing costs level out. And I think this is massive. We're just doing an exercise where we're looking at the cost of Beattie Passive and the cost of traditional build. It had always been a little bit higher. It had always been, you know, how can I put 300 millimetre of insulation into a wall, which I normally just have 70? How can I put triple glazed windows in when I don't do this? How can I have all that fire protection, all that sound protection, all that radon protection? How can I have all that for less money? What's happened is the traditional building has gone up. Beattie Passive has stayed pretty stagnant. We're using young people. We've got new people in the industry. So we're seeing a real level out in cost. And I think that the answer to your question is change is coming. And we will see more people like yourself living in them. Nothing's perfect. You know, people say to me, well, you know, Passivhouses can go. Of course they can. I mean, the biggest thing is that we do our best and we work as hard as we can. And all the testing and processing and putting will make it work. Any other building house won't be the same. So you'll find that the clients, that's you who are actually buying that home, are going to say, I want a passive home.
Thank you. The next question we have is from Sarah. What type of foundations are required, and can it be put on normal strip foundations? Okay, yeah. The Beattie Passive has got its own foundations, but it's also can go on a strip foundation, a normal strip foundation. It's a lot lighter. It's a timber frame building, so our point loads are a lot lighter. And in fact, you only need to put strips down. So if you're going to do a render finish or a brick slip finish or timber finish, you'll just need some strips, normally 3 meters apart. And those strips will be normally 600 millimeters wide by 900 millimeters or 600, depending on your ground conditions. But it's a cheaper way to do it. The other one that Beattie Passive designed was a pad and beam. So basically we put a little pad here and a little pad 3 meters apart, and then we had a precast beam that went across it. And that meant that the amount of soil that you had to dig out and the amount of concrete you had to put in was a lot less. That's my preferred option, but unfortunately, again, this comes back to the traditional way of doing it. Many ground workers like to dig a great big hole and fill it all with concrete, but things are changing. So if you'd like to look at our case studies, you can go there and see all the different foundation types. Thank you. The next question is from Donna, who asked, can Beattie Passive buildings be zero carbon? And what sort of heating do you use to get there? Okay. Yes,
I mean, all the stuff that's going to be coming out from our new factory, volumetric factory, will be zero carbon. Beattie Passive get to zero carbon with a gas boiler and 2.5 kilowatts of PVs, which was the Code of Sustainable Homes definition of zero carbon. Today, we've got the great advantage of having battery storage. And also we've got a lot more sophisticated heat pumps coming on. And so we've got different machinery now where we can have heat pumps working with MVHR, working with heating systems and hot water. The Coin 4 system, which is which is manufactured. Oh, I've got the name now where it comes from, but I'll come back to me in a moment. That system's got it all in, and we're looking at trialing that to see how that works. But gas is the easiest one at the moment, because the SAP likes gas and Passivhaus likes gas in its computer modelling. But that's changing after April, and we will see electricity being seen as more green, green energy.
Okay, thank you. Brian's asked, what is the insulation made from?
Okay, the insulation is made from 2% recycled oil and 98% steam. It's very, very green indeed. It won't let moisture go across it at all, and it dissipates under fire. So it's a really, really good insulation. And people say to me, Ron, yeah, but it's not green enough. You know, we'd like to use cellulose, we'd like to use different walls. And I said, I'm sorry, but what happens when that building gets wet? And they say to me, well, no, the roof's going to be on it. It won't lose it. And I say, I'm not building for today. I'm building for 50, 100, 200 years' time. So, you know, you'll knock a hole in that wall. You'll get moisture into that cavity at some point. What happens then? So that's where Beattie Passive are different. We're looking at what happens in the future. So our insulation is blown bead. It's really a green material. And as I say, its longevity is forever. It doesn't slump. You can completely immerse it in water. So it's a phenomenal insulation that's pumped in all around the void. But also we can test it really easily, because what we do is we heat the building up to 40 degrees and we thermal image every Beattie Passive home. So if there's a gap anywhere, we can find it and fill it. And if you're going to knock the building down and move it, you can join it together 100% in 100 years' time.
Okay, thank you. A question from Andrew is, how long will it take to build a 3-bedroom home in the Beattie Passive system?
Okay, it depends on how many people working on it really. But if you normally, for sort of 3-bedroom home, you're looking at about 3 weeks for the structure, 3 to 4 weeks for the structure. And then, you know, normally it's less time than traditional build, you know, because you're on site, you're putting it up, you've got all your materials there, you're not waiting for deliveries, and you can get on it very quickly. And as you go on and build more, if you're looking at that, it becomes faster and faster and faster. I, for instance, me and one other director, when we built the first one, built the whole structure in a week. I was very tired at the end of it, but I was determined to see just how long it took to build. So 2 people, 3-bedroom home, took me 1 week to build the structure. I was very tired at the end of it, mind you.
What is the average cost of the Beattie Passive system, and how does this differ from the traditional build? Okay, well this is one I can answer, and this is one that I'm really going to be speaking about in some depth over the coming months. As I say, we've always thought we are being slightly higher, but we've always known that that is starting to level out. And at the moment, we've had some cost exercise done by QSs in Manchester and in London. And in fact, we're cheaper. I'm going to say that again. Building in Beattie Passive up against traditional build is cheaper. And when I say that, traditional build's got no insulation, hardly. It's got holes everywhere. It's got no real fire. It's got no real sound. It's built to the lowest denominator. That's building regs. Beattie Passive is built to the best, and we're actually cheaper. Is that correct? Yes, I'm being told it is. And that's phenomenal. What is cheaper? What is cost? Trouble is that building costs vary from builder to builder to area. So what we're working on is the cost consultants that work under, the governance that they work under, and they're telling me that the cost, and these are all costs that we've built to and we know, and we've targeted, and we've got our partners doing it as well. And so we're about the £1,500, £1,600 a square metre mark. And building is about £1,500, £1,600 a square metre mark. If you're building, some houses, of course, are 2,500, 3,000, 4,000. In London, it's £3,000 a metre. But we're there. Beattie Passive has turned the corner. And if it can be cheaper, if it can give you all those benefits, why aren't you doing it? Thank you. The next question is from Kira, which is, there's a perception or rumour that when living in a passive house, you're required to keep the windows closed. Is this true?
No, very good one. No, complete myth. I always say to my clients, live in a home, it's not a passive home, it's your home. So when it's sunny, like it is today, open your windows. When it's cold, what do you normally do? You shut your windows. The MVHR system will run 24/7 all the time for about £35 to £50 a year. it will save you 80% of the energy that you've created, whether you're out the windows or not. So, you know, just live normally. One person said to me, well, what happens at Christmas time when I come around and I'm cooking chips on Boxing Day? And, you know, and what do I do? All these people. I said, well, what do you do now? He said, well, open the windows. Got it. Open your windows. Live naturally. But also don't get so read up with Passivhaus. I was talking to Wolfgang Feast many years ago, and he said that, you know, the biggest thing is that we head to that standard. If we don't make it, then we don't make it. So, you know, I always say to them, if you've got a lovely view north facing, and I've built houses like it for many clients, and the view's fantastic, but my computer model, which is the passive house planning package, is telling me that the windows are too big there. So look at your lovely, lovely view. Forget Passivhaus. Build to the standard if that's what you want, if you can do, and you'll get the benefits phenomenally. So every house that we build should be like a normal house. It's your home.
Thank you. And a question from David. So how is Beattie Passive set up for future adaptability in terms of either loft conversion or extensions to respond to the demand of growing families or changing situations?
Yeah, built into the system. I always, as a builder, have extended and moved my homes and changed them you know, around over time. So very important for me was how you do that. And as I say, we've got a radon barrier that lifts right up. All you're doing is you take that down, drop it down, extend your foundations, extend your building, and the insulation that you're going to pump around will join 100% together again, 100% together again. So you'll get no joints again on that. Because there's a service void around the whole building, you can get to all your services. Wow, you know, I want to find an electrical circuit that's up in behind a wall. It's normally rendered over. It's normally chucked into chases. Where do you find it? Not here. You can find it in your void and extend it. So building in Beattie Passive gives you so much flexibility, because every home we ever build should be able to go up and out.
Thank you. Another question from Paul was, can the structure be steel frame as an alternative to timber frame?
Right. We have to put steel in many of our buildings because of the size of them. You know, we build lots of beautiful homes for private clients. But because the steel's going in the void, then you can put insulation around it. Steel's a really, really bad thermal piece of kit. You know, you touch two bits of steel together, you're going to get quite a burn between if you're heating one side up to the other. So, you know, we reduce the amount of steel, but you know, you can put a steel house up, and we've done that, a steel frame, and then we've built around that, so we've encapsulated it around it, and the steel has been on the warm side, and that's very easy. And because we can create a void at any size, one thing our pattern does, our pattern's from about 4 mil to about 3 foot, covers the void. So we can put steel in that, and we can actually then insulate completely around it. So yes, we can build in steel, but the actual insulation wants to be framed up in timber.
Okay, a question from Paolo is, how do I become a partner, I presume a Flying Factory partner, and what do I need to do? Okay, so
basically, you're more than welcome to become one of our partners. It'd be really interesting to you to hear one of the next seminars. But basically, we invite you to join Beattie Passive as a Flying Factory partner. We will be training you. We'll be helping you set up your factories. We'll be doing all the design and testing with you, and then you can go on and build your own homes. And it is a partnership. We're always here with our partners, and we're going to grow together. I mean, what a phenomenal opportunity to take something that delivers so much and be able to deliver it together. And we learn together. So all of our partners bring information to us. We monitor and we check and we test their buildings, and we give them advice, and we help them through it, because nothing's ever perfect. Everyone has a bad day. I mean, you know, this weekend I was making some cupboards and I was painting, and I painted them all one day. On the Saturday they were perfect. On the Sunday I gave them a second coat, and there was 4 runs over it, all the way down the wall. Terrible. But you know, no difference in the days. Probably had too much wine on the Saturday night, but never mind.
Okay, thank you. And the next question, I'm just going to move over so people can look at the webinars that we're talking about. The next question is from Heather. I have a box steel frame barn I want to convert, and I'm worried about the steel frame will pose a cold bridge unless the frame encapsulates it. However, I don't think the planners would allow this. Do you think this system will still be possible?
Yes, we've done 4 now barns which have been encapsulated with the Beattie Passive system. So as I say, we can go where we're looking at tightness in the building, we can go along and then we go just round the steel frame and then come back into the build line again and then around it, and the roof we go over the top. So I can't actually say this, but I'm very sure that your plan permission will be granted with a passive wrap. We've done that on 4 other occasions to different barns.
Thank you. There's a question from Peter. Is there warranty cover for 10 to 12 years?
Yes, there is. Yeah. Working with the warranty companies isn't easy. They don't like change. They don't like risk. But we work with many of the normal ones. We've got over 300 properties that are out there now, all mortgaged by everyone. And we're the only company that tests its product. Just think of that. Any other build process, any other builder, do they test it? No. Have we got an independent structure engineer or surveyor going around checking it and putting his IP insurance against it? No. So we're seen as a real safe bet. But we're different. You know, we're saying, for instance, that, you know, when you build normal timber frame, you have a slab and you put a bit of a DPM and then you put a bit of timber on it. And what happens when the water gets in? It lays on that and rots it. In a Beattie Passive system, you've got a void underneath that then goes down to a ventilated void. So no water will ever lay on your system. So, you know, we are different. We do find certain challenges, but all the, you know, we've been marketed and we've been mortgaged, and so that's not an issue.
Okay, well, so we're coming up to the top of the hour now. It's just a couple more questions, but one here from Brian, who says, fire safety is a big concern in the sector at the moment. Can you explain a little more on the fire safety of your timber frame system, particularly in regards to stacked flats and cladding? Yeah,
of course. Right, we've just been actually working on a retrofit around the Grenville Tower fire, and we're doing quite a large project around that because I'm really interested in fire. So yes, I mean, when I designed the system, we said we've got 2 hours. So we've got 2 boards of fireproof board, which is 1 hour of 40 minutes each side on that board. We've then got a void, and then we've got our plasterboard. Now, when you build on site with stick build, you actually build the party wall, first of all, with a board against it. You then build the next board on the outside. So as you build the building, you're fireproofing that building. So you may have seen where we've had timber frame buildings that haven't been clad until the end with fireproof boarding or plasterboard, all gone up. With Beattie Passive, you're constantly cladding with a fire protection as you build. Every building that comes out in the panel form, as it's built, is then clad again. So we're reducing that fire risk all the time. And in volumetric, it comes out completely fireproof as well. And fire needs to be looked at really seriously, certainly in the external cladding, and also the insulations that we use, which is really important. That's why we test and we look at everything. In fact, in the retrofit that we've just been doing, we've been looking at post-Grenville, where we've been putting external sprinkler systems on the outside of the building in our void. And so if there was ever another Grenville Tower fire and it ever did start to climb for whatever reason, it wouldn't because we're using non-combustible materials, we could flood the outside of that building and put it out. It may never be used, but it's there. That's the main thing.
Okay, so just one more question before we finish. So Peter's asked, do you have many problems with differential movement with structures over 2 stories? Right.
The idea of that is no. Basically, we've created a diaphragm, and it's even. We've got racking board, and that's going up and across and round in the whole building. And just to show you how good that is, when our houses for one, that's done at over 2,500 miles on the road. It's been lifted up and off a crane 25 times. You can go into the bathroom and look at the mastic sill around the building. You can go into the kitchen and look at the mastic sill. Perfect. That's how strong the buildings are when you've got diaphragms connected to each other. So the buildings are incredibly strong. And you don't get any differential movement from the outside because we've got 2 separate timbers. This one warmer on the inside, this one's colder. You're not getting that pull against each other because the insulation's in between. So very little disproportional movement.
Thank you very much. So I think that's all the questions we have time for now. If there's any questions you've raised that we didn't have a chance to cover, Ken, our National Sales Manager, will be coming back to you individually just to cover those off and make sure we answer all of your questions. I know some of you have asked multiple questions today, so we will get back to you all. If you do have any other questions following today's webinar, then please do email us in enquiries or Ken Mercer directly, and we will get back to you. And we will be sharing the webinar following this session, so you can, if you want to pass it on to colleagues or send it on to anyone, then you're welcome to do that.
Lovely. Well, thank you ever so much for your time today. Hopefully you will be visiting us again, and please keep safe. We've got some wonderful opportunities when we all come out the other side of this. So thank you very much for your time. Keep safe and God bless.